In this video, we're going to explore the basics of how the brain works through a clear and interactive explanation that focuses on the essentials. This will help you understand and directly perceive how the brain shapes our experiences. And finally, we will see how all of this can be useful in daily life. So, I invite you on a journey deep into the brain. A journey that will take us from the microscopic scale of neurons to the global scale of the brain and the thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and experiences that emerges from it. Welcome to Neurorama. I'm Lohan Olivari, a passionate neuroscientist turned science communicator, and I'll be your guide on this journey. Before diving into the brain, though, and to make this exploration more interesting, I invite you first to directly observe what emerges from your brain right now. To help you notice it, relax your gaze from the video and allow the edges of your visual field to enter your attention. Observe your entire field of vision, this ever-present panorama of shapes and colors. You're experiencing right now the miracle of vision and consciousness. Now, focus on the physical sensation of your body. Become aware of your breathing, its rhythm and depth. Does this bring up emotions or thoughts? Generally, we don't notice how it shapes our experience. Yet at every moment, our brain allows us to perceive our environment, body, emotions, and thoughts, and it deeply influences them. So now that we are directly connected to the experience of having a brain, let's dive deep into this fascinating organ and discover how it works. We enter the brain. But soon, there's a problem. We are in the dark. Not because we can't see anything, but because the functioning of this organ is not obvious. To help us grasp how the brain works, we need a tool. The light that will guide us through this expedition is the connection between structure and function. The idea that the structure of a thing informs us about its function. For example, our lungs are structured like expandable sacs because their function is to expand to draw in air and contract to expel it. The structure of the lungs helps us understand how they work. This link between structure and function is a key principle in biology because it applies to all elements that makes up living organisms, including the brain and its components. With this tool in hand, we can now dive deep into the brain, down to the microscopic scale to explore its key component, neurons. In a nutshell, a neuron consists of three parts. Dendrites, which receive electrical and chemical signals and transmit them to the second part. The cell body, which integrates these signals and, once a certain excitation threshold is reached, send an electrical signal to the last part. The axon, which propagates this electrical signal. To illustrate how neurons work, I've made this red dot appear and gradually grow on the screen. Even though it's been here and expanding for a while, you probably only noticed it recently. That's because, as it grows, it increasingly stimulates your sensory neurons until they activate, passing the information to the rest of the brain and allowing you to become aware of its presence. We can therefore say that neurons are structured like a funnel, propagating the information only once they reach a certain threshold of activation. But what stimulates these neurons? Well, primarily, other neurons. Indeed, if we continue our exploration, we notice that neurons are connected to each other, forming the so-called neural networks. Understanding neurons is a major step toward grasping how the brain works. But there's still an intermediate step before we reach the global scale of the brain. When we zoom out from individual neurons, neural networks appear. Like a giant spider web, they form an interconnected structure that the scientists call the connectome. Within this vast network, there are some areas that are more interconnected than others, forming specific zones. These zones are distinct neural networks, each with their own position, connections, and unique characteristics. They are the brain structures often associated with particular functions, such as the hippocampus and memory, or the amygdala and emotions. Moreover, the neurons in these different networks use different molecules to communicate with each other. These are the well-known neurotransmitters and neuromodulators, such as dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. What's important here is that every brain function is supported by a specialized neural network, ranging from perception, thinking, memory, love, fear, sadness, movement, and many others. This means that everything that influences these neural networks will also influence the functions they control. But we will come back to that later. For now, if we continue our journey and zoom out from these neural networks, a cluster of approximately 90 billion neurons appears. We arrived. This is the brain. But that's not all. We also see a large bundle of neurons extending directly from the brain, the spinal cord, a set of nerves functioning like a highway at the center of our spinal column. Finally, neurons emerge from the spinal cord and extend throughout the body. Here, at the extremities of this vast nerve network known as the peripheral nervous system, we see sensory cells, muscles, and organs. These elements all influence our nervous system. They are in fact the sources of the external and internal perceptions that we felt together earlier. But they are also influenced by our nervous system, which coordinates their activity. Now, what does this structure tell us about the brain's functioning? The global organization of the nervous system allows us to understand that the brain receives information from the environment and body, processes it in specific areas according to the type of information, and finally, it transmits this processed information to other neural networks, which use it to send appropriate commands to the body in order to respond to the current situation. The brain, therefore, acts as the intermediary between the ascending information coming from the senses and the descending information that sends orders to the body. In this way, the brain can be compared to a massive data processing center. Sensory data arrive through multiple cables, representing the peripheral nervous system. Each server specializes in processing a specific type of data, just like the different networks of our brain. Meanwhile, the servers communicate with each other to create a representation of the incoming data, our conscious experience of reality, and an appropriate response, the commands that influence the body. All of this happen in real time and with remarkable precision and efficiency. For instance, when you're listening to this video, your auditory sensory cell activate neurons based on the sound you hear. This neural activity encodes the information as an electrical signal. Then the signal activates neural networks that are related to auditory perception, allowing them to process the information. Finally, the processed information spreads to other related brain areas, such as those responsible for language comprehension, which enables you to understand the meaning of these explanations and to integrate them into your ongoing experience. Depending on the overall structure and current activity of your nervous system, this understanding will generate emotions, thoughts, and actions. Like pausing this video right now and taking a second to share it if you find it valuable. But back to the brain, this broad process I just described for hearing also applied to other senses and brain functions, such as vision, smell, taste, pain, or pleasure. Something activates neurons. These neurons influence the networks that are linked to that stimulus, which then shape our experience and behaviors. We've made great progress in our journey to understand the brain. But now we reached a crucial step. We need to move from the physical activation of neural networks to our conscious human experience. This is not a simple step. There's still much debate on how our consciousness is linked to brain activity. So for this video, we will focus on what appears to be common across different neuroscientific theories of consciousness. In short, the brain neural networks are interconnected in such an intricate, dynamic, and complex way that our conscious experience emerges from them. In other words, at any given moment, your brain is integrating information that enters, is present in, and comes out of your nervous system, so as to generate your conscious experience of this situation. Finally, we are here, back in our direct experience, but with a better understanding of how our brain generates this experience. We did it. Your brain is beginning to understand itself. Although this explanation is limited, it's useful because it helps us to understand the overall function of the brain. It also reveals something crucial for our understanding of the brain, its context. Indeed, to truly understand how the brain functions, we must also consider the context in which it operates, our body and environment. This is important because within the nervous system, all the neural networks are connected, directly or indirectly, to our body and surroundings. Thus, the state of our body and environment greatly influences the information entering our nervous system, which in turn affects our experiences and behaviors. For example, exercise, diet, social relationships, or even the smells in our environment have profound effects on our brain, even if we don't realize it. Discovering this can motivate us to better understand what influences the brain. And since the brain has memory and judgment capabilities, we can progressively learn what influences are beneficial or harmful to us. And because the brain is capable of exerting willpower, we have the ability to consciously adjust our behavior and environment accordingly. We can summarize what we learned so far by saying that the brain functions as a data processing center. Through the activation of complex networks, it integrates, processes, and utilizes information from the environment and body to generate our conscious experience and our behaviors. I hope that this video simplifies effectively the complex working of our brain, but tell me in the comment what you thought because it's not an easy task. The billions of neurons that makes up the brain form a network of such an immense complexity that it's difficult to describe or even imagine. There are approximately 2,000 times more neural connections in your brain than there are stars in our entire galaxy. But back here on Earth, neuroscience has come a long way in the last few decades. And I think that it's time for this knowledge to be accessible to everyone. Since we all have a brain, neuroscience is relevant to us all. The knowledge it produces can help us better understand and navigate our human experience. The goal of this channel is to make neuroscience accessible, engaging, and useful to everyone. I really want to keep releasing this video here for free. So if you resonate with this goal, subscribe and share the video as it helps the channel a lot. Also come check out my Patreon page where I've put exclusive info about me and the channel, plus resources to thank you for your support. Finally, if you want to keep exploring the brain, I highly recommend this video and I wish you a great day.